Hi, welcome back. We've got another video today working on our bezeling cabochons. So what we're going to do is switch over to the bead mat and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we can make this into. Okay, so this is what we have made in the first two videos. We did the bezeling in the first one and then we finished off with the backing. So if you haven't watched either of those two videos, you can find those on my YouTube channel to catch you up on what you have missed. Now, once you've made something like this, what can we do with it? Today, I want to just take you through a few little design features on some of my other pieces to give you some inspiration. And then I'm going to show this piece getting a little bit of embellishment and thinking about how I can make it into a pendant. These are the first piece of inspiration I have to show you today. This is a pair of earrings that I've made. And these are two matching cabochons. And you can see I've done peyote bezels around those in the same way as I showed you. And then on the inside here, I've got a little picot in there that just adds a little bit of dimension to the edge. And then I've also done another picot on the outside. Now, if you don't know what a picot is, it's like a point of beads, traditionally, 3 or 5 beads that are designed to sit out with one at a little point like this one here. So you can see them probably a little bit easier too from the back, generally in a group of 3. So there's 1, 2, 3 beads there on the edge, and they create this little lacy effect on these. I really love these earrings. I do wear them a lot. They're very light and super easy to make. If you can follow the first couple of videos and make the bezel, then you can follow this one here and put a few picots on the edge and you have a gorgeous pair of earrings. Okay, this piece here that I've brought to show you is the first ever piece that I made. This was a workshop that I did with Ruth Davies at the Melbourne Bead Retreat with the Bead Society Victoria, and it was learning how to bezel with peyote stitch around a cabochon, learning different ways to create embellishments on the edges. And I was super proud of this, and I really love the way it turned out. You can see here on the edges, I've got some picot stitches there, and that creates a little bit of extra dimension on this cabochon. I've done a few rows of backstitched beads around the outside of it. And then when I've done my brick stitch edging, instead of using one bead like we did, I've stacked up 2 beads high. So I would be picking up 2 beads at a time instead of the single one. And then adding this little edging here, which is 2 seed beads either side of a drop bead. And then on the front, it's got 2 seed beads with a Rizo drop bead. So I'm super proud of this one. It's got a chenille stitch rope from it. I used to wear this a lot, and I don't know, I've got other pieces that I wear more these days, but it's nice to see where my bead embroidery started as to where it's come these days. It also gives you a little bit of inspiration as to what you can do with your pieces. This one here, I just wanted to quickly show you. This has come out of my sample jar, and you can see the base that the cabochon is peyote stitch bezel, just like we did. Only on here, I've used some bicones around the center of it. So it's a bit reflective with the lighting in here. I'm just trying to get that in focus for you to see. It's got a backing on it just like we did, and it's a piece of leather that you can see the basis of those stitches there are exactly the same. And then I've done some bead weaving off the edge. So I used some seed beads, some super duos, some 2-hole daggers, and some pearl beads. And then on this side, you can see I've also layered up using these gorgeous little ones. These are called a gecko bead. Love these. So you don't have to stop at one row of embellishment. If you find that what you're working on, you could fit in another row or a layered row of embellishment, by all means, that's an option too. So this one's just sitting in the sample jar waiting to see whether it will become something more, or it might just be a good, step off to designing something else at some stage. The last sample that I wanted to show you today is this piece, which I put in a exhibition a few years ago, and I was very lucky. This actually was a prize winner. I think it received first place in that exhibition. and I was super proud of it. It's got lots of different types of bezels, and I'll just run around quickly to give you an idea. But here, this one here is exactly what you've learnt in the lesson, only the beads I've done around the outside. I've done various brick beads and tile beads. These are all 2-hole beads. And then I've done some rounds, a few cubes up here. These are 1.8mm Miyuki cubes. And this was actually a bead, so I was able to stitch that down first. I didn't need to worry about any glue, and then bezel around it as if it was a cabochon. This one here is exactly the same as the 2 lessons I showed you. The only difference with this one is the shape of it. And because it's still quite rounded, it still works okay without taking into account the shape that you are bezeling around. You can easily capture something quite rounded like this with a peyote stitch bezel. And then you can see this was all edged in one piece, this central piece here. So that would have all been joined on one piece of foundation. And then this one at the top here, these are both labradorite, beautiful gemstones, really reflective, and these are quite good quality ones. They have a really nice shift to them and a beautiful color. And you can see peyote bezel here, and then the bead embroidery, I've done some bigger bricks and tiles up here. And then down the bottom here, I've done some cubes. Then on the sides here, I've done a series of different types of bezels or sewing down of the beads. This is a bead, and I really liked the edges of a couple of these different beads. They've got that nice Picasso-y edge with the table cut top on the bead. And I wanted to retain, I didn't want a bead over that, so I wanted to retain that. So these are stitched down through the hole in the bead and then bead embroidery around the outside. But they've all finished with a backing like the little one from the first videos. So a few different there. And then I've joined this all together by linking beads between the pieces, sewing back and forth through these edge beads. I think there's some peanuts in there. I've used a little spike bead here, and I'm showing you this from the back so that you can see the way that you can link your pieces together really easily. And I've done very little embellishment as such on each of these components, but when you put it all together, it just works really well, really nice together. And I had this multi-strand clasp, which tied in with the color tones of the piece quite well and is really comfortable to wear. It's nice and flat and doesn't poke you in the neck when you're wearing it. This one here's a little piece of power shell. So I just used some bits and pieces that were kicking around that I loved the colors. And when you're making something like this, it's nice to gather a few supplies together and put them together in the container or lay them out on your bead mat and see how they speak to you and how you want to use them. But I just wanted to show you by starting with something just as small as this little guy, you can then use those same techniques and make something really stands out from the crowd. So now we've seen a little bit of inspiration, we need to work out what we're going to do with this. And I think it would be nice to do a couple of rows of a picot edge and then maybe put a bail on the top and see what it looks like if it was hanging from a rope. And I'm going to test it on a fairly basic piece of leather just to see what it looks like to get an idea for it as a pendant. You could also use this as the main component in a bracelet, and you could have, you know, some bead weaving or some strands of beads off either side. Keeping in mind that if you're doing a necklace or a bracelet and you only do one strand off either side, it makes the design really prone to twisting and flipping over when you're wearing it. So if you do have multiple connections, it allows this not to flip as much. Like with these ones here, I've got multiple connections, so there's no chance that that's going to flip over when I'm wearing it. They're always going to sit to the front and no chance of it twisting or getting tangled up. All right, so I've just put on my bead mat some of these Silverline Dark Smoky Amethyst AB Miyuki seed beads in the size 11. It's 111013. And I've also put out some of these raspberry lined sapphire Miyuki 3.4mm drop beads. And these have a little colored lining in them. And when you see them from the end, they sort of look like a different shade of purple where you catch that little pink lining that's on the inside there. So I think they'll be really lovely in combination with what we have here already. And I'm going to do a picot edge all around the outside. If you want your picot edge to go completely around the outside, you need to have an even amount of beads in this row. If you count them and you find that you have an odd number, you'll have one space left to do your last picot, and there won't be another spot to put the second one in. It just won't work out. I've counted this. I've got 49 beads, so I do have an odd problem. But what I'm going to do is leave a little space for us to connect a little bail off the top of this and then embellish the rest of it. So we can make it work with what we have. I'm going to thread up my needle with some of my fire line, and I'm just melting a little knot on the end here. I'm going to put my knot in the front of this bezel, and you can see I'm bringing my needle out here on the back, right near the edge. I'm going to come out of a size 11 bead on the edge there. Now, just for strength purposes and to make sure that that knot holds, I'm just going to thread through to the next bead, simply because I want to make sure that that knot holds nicely. You notice I'm working from the back again. You can work from the front if you want. It doesn't really matter at this stage. So to do our picot edge, I'm going to pick up a size 11 seed bead, drop, and a size 11 seed bead. And then I'm coming out of this one here. I'm going to pass back through in the opposite direction on the one right next to it. And essentially what we're doing is we're just zigzagging back and forth through the beads. I'm going to come back up through the next one, pick up a seed bead, a drop, a seed bead, and then pass down through that next seed bead. And you can see they're sitting really nicely, little picot on the edge there, like that. So I'm going to continue that all the way around the outside. Now, as I'm coming up here, I want to think about what sort of bezel I'm going to do off the top and how wide a bezel, a bail off the top there, and how wide I want that bail to be. So I think maybe just one more of these picot stitches, and that will leave enough room for a delicate bail at the top of this piece. It's not a huge pendant, so it doesn't need a huge bail to carry it. All right, so you can see I've got 3 seed beads at the top there with nothing on there. What we're going to do today is 3 simple loops of seed beads that we can then thread our cord through. So I'll get a piece of cord that we can use as a bit of an example. Okay, so I have a piece of rubber cord here. It's about 4 to 5 millimeters thick. It's a really soft, spongy foam piece of cord. Sometimes I put this in the core of a beaded rope. Today we're just using it as a tool to see how this looks hanging from making our pendant. Now I'm going to use these beautiful purple seed beads, and I don't know yet how many I'm going to need for this bail. So I'm going to start by, I've got 4 on there. I'll try adding 10 and see what that looks like. So that's 10 beads. I still think that's going to be a bit short when we go to add on our rope. Let's try 15. So what I can do now is just lay those beads around the rope like this and just see, is that rope going to fit in there? Snug up those beads. I think it's going to be just a smidge tight. I'm going to go for 16. Try 16 beads. And I've come out of that silver bead. I'm going to go back into that silver bead like that. And just create that loop there. And I'm going to thread my piece of tube through and just take a look at how that looks. So I'm just holding the thread. I think it needs to be a little bit more. I might try 18 beads. I think it's hanging a little bit too close to the rope, and then it's going to interfere with these little picot edges there. So take my needle off, undo there, and find the end, rethread my needle. So I had 16, I think, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. You know what? We're going to add 4 more beads and make it an even 20 beads on that loop and see how that looks. It looks long like that, but remember it's doubling over, coming back down through that bead there. And that's going to pull up into a nice little loop. Let's see what that looks like when we put the cord through this time. That's looking better. It's looking more balanced for length. I think too, if I do 20 beads and then later I have a beaded rope, it might even fit through that loop to have the beaded rope. So I think 20 is a good even amount for this one. So now I'm going to come up through this next bead and I'm going to put 20 on that one as well. All right, just double checking I've got the right amount of beads. 2, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 18, 20. Yep. Come back through that bead on the edge there that I came out of. Now we've got 2 loops. And now I am going to do a 3rd loop. So I've done 3 very simple loops of beads, nothing too fancy, but when you've got the 3 of them there, it's going to look really nice through this to hang it from. How gorgeous is that going to be? What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to go through those 3 loops again just to reinforce them. So I'm going to come across to the first one. I'm just digging in through that initial foundation. And I'm going to come up through that first silver bead. And I'm going to head through all the beads in these 3 loops again, just to add a bit of extra strength. What I am going to do is bring my needle now up through the foundation a bit and find my way over near the bezel beads, because we're going to add a little picot edge around that bezel. And I'm going to try and come in, that's the first bit round, that lower bead here. I'm going to try and come in through this next round. Oh, that's a tight bead. Don't push too hard. Might need to come up through a different one. Now I know that my beads on my bezel are even. I had an even amount of beads in my bezel, so I know that my picot will work all the way around. I might need to switch down a needle size. I think that is not going to go in. So that's my straw needle. Let's see what else I have over here. I've got a little bit thinner needle here. It's probably a size 12. Let's see if I can get into that bezel now. It's feeling better. There's not as much pressure. I didn't want to break any of those beads in that initial bezel. Okay, so now I am going to add a little picot, and this is going to add a little bit of dimension to the bezel itself. I'm actually looking, I think it needs to be a little bit higher. I'm going to go one row high up. So I'm the third bead up. You count the rows diagonally in peyote. So this is 1, this is 2, this is 3. I'm the third bead up in my bezel. And we're going to do a picot this time with some size 15 seed beads. And I could use these ones here that are in the front of the bezel, or I could use a silver to match in with this silver row. What I might do is a combination of the two. So this is the matte opaque cobalt AB that we used in the central to cinch in our bezel. And this is a Czech silver Mayuki bead. So 1527000. One of my favorite beads in the stash. I can never do without that. If it's running low, need to get some more of that. It's good to have a nice base silver and a nice gold. All right, so to do this picot, I am going to pick up 1 blue, 1 silver, 1 blue, and then I'm going to pass through the next bead in that row, not the next one up, not this one, but the next bead in that row. Sort of going at a bit of an angle. And when I pull that up tight, see how it creates a little picot there? You see that? It creates a little bit more dimension on the bezel. So I'm going to repeat that all the way around. 1 blue, 1 silver, 1 blue, and pass through the next one. And they create these little triangular shaped points or picots. Now when you get to your last picot, still a spot for it to go. It's just a bit trickier. You'll see I'll need to go into that bead there, and it's sort of hard to get into that spot, but it's still doable. Just got to be gentle. And I'll come through the next 2 beads there. Okay, there we go. We've got our picots all the way around the edge there. And for the final step here, I just need to knot off my thread. I'm going to come back down towards the bottom of the bezel, coming out towards the back there, springing the needle out to somewhere where it's easier for me to tie a couple of knots. I'll come up into the edging and out that little bit of picot. Just doing a couple of little knots around the thread there. I'll do a half hitch knot on that side of the drop. Do another little half hitch knot between those beads, and then I'm going to come out of this drop here and melt off the thread. I like to melt mine down into a little knot inside the bead so that I know that that is not going to travel anywhere. It's not going to pull out. There we go. Finished. Let's see what it looks like on the cord. Look at that. A pendant ready to wear, looking gorgeous, has lots of texture, lots of things that you've practiced to make it. And I'm very happy with how that's turned out.